The most dangerous man in Seoul was about to do something he'd never done before. Walk into his daughter's school without a weapon. Jin Park stood outside the gates of Gracefield Academy, watching children in crisp uniforms laugh and play, and felt more unarmed than he'd ever been in 20 years of running the city's underground. His hand instinctively moved to his empty holster. Inside those pristine walls, his 9-year-old daughter Zara was fighting a war he couldn't shoot his way out of, and that terrified him more than any rival gang ever had. Hey family, before the story begins, do me a favor real quick. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your comments fuel these stories. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because what happens next will leave you speechless. Happy New Year to every single one of you. Let's start this year with a story that will keep you glued till the very end. The morning had started like any other. Jin sat at the head of his dining table, black coffee steaming in front of him, watching Zara arrange her breakfast with surgical precision. Each piece of fruit lined up perfectly. Strawberries first, then blueberries smallest to largest. Her small brown fingers worked with focus that reminded him too much of himself when he was planning operations. "Everything okay, princess?" Jin asked in Korean, his voice softer than it ever was in his office. Zara nodded without looking up. "Yes, Appa." Her voice barely carried across the table. Jin studied her over his coffee cup. 3 years ago, he'd found her hiding in a warehouse during a raid. Some bastard had been trafficking kids. Jin had dealt with that problem permanently. But this little girl with scared eyes had looked at him, covered in blood that wasn't his, and hadn't screamed. She'd just asked quietly if he was going to hurt her too. Something in his chest had cracked that night. Now she was his daughter, legally adopted, protected by the most feared name in Seoul's underworld. And yet something was wrong. The light caught her braids, the ones he'd learned to do himself because he refused to let strangers touch his daughter. She'd redone them twice this morning. Her school uniform was perfect, every pleat straight. Even her shoelaces were tied with identical loops. "Want me to pack extra snacks?" Jin offered, already reaching for her favorite crackers. "No thank you, Appa." She wrapped her half-eaten toast in a napkin and threw it away. She usually finished everything. Jin's jaw tightened. In his world, you learned to read people or you died. And right now, his daughter was screaming silence. The drive to Gracefield Academy was quiet except for rain starting to tap against the windows. Jin's driver, Min Seo, knew better than to speak during these morning runs. In the rearview mirror, Jin watched Zara stare out the window, her small hands twisted together in her lap. The closer they got to school, the tighter those hands gripped. "Zarya," he said gently as they pulled up to the gate. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Her eyes met his in the mirror, dark brown and carrying weight no 9-year-old should bear. "I know, Appa." She gathered her backpack, squared her small shoulders like a soldier, and climbed out. Jin watched her walk through those gates, her head high but her steps careful, like she was walking into enemy territory. The image followed him all day, through meetings with his lieutenants about territory disputes, through negotiations with suppliers, through the endless calculations of running an empire built on fear and money. But his mind kept returning to those twisted hands, that forced smile. His second-in-command, Tae-won, noticed during their afternoon meeting. "Boss, you good?" Jin looked up from the reports spread across his desk. "Zara's been quiet lately." Tae-won raised an eyebrow. The scarred veteran had been with Jin since the beginning, had killed more men than he could count. But even he softened when it came to the little girl who'd somehow tamed their boss. Kids go through phases. Not like this. Jin's fingers drummed the desk. "Something's wrong. Want me to look into it?" Jin shook his head. "I'll handle it." That evening, Jin came home earlier than usual. His penthouse overlooked the Han River, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city he controlled. But tonight, the view didn't interest him. He found Zara at the dining table, homework spread out, working with that same intense focus. "How was school?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Fine." She didn't look up from her math worksheet. Jin sat down across from her, watched her write numbers with perfect precision. "Make any new friends?" Her pencil paused for just a second. Not really. He wanted to push, to demand answers like he did in interrogations. But this was his daughter. She needed patience he'd forgotten how to have. Dinner was quiet. Jin had hired the best Korean chef in Seoul, but he noticed Zara barely touched her food, just pushed it around her plate, taking small bites when she thought he was watching. Bath time was worse. When he helped wash her hair like he did every night, she flinched when he poured the water. Just slightly. But Jin had built an empire on noticing small things. Water too hot? He asked, though he knew it wasn't. No, appa. It's fine. But her hands gripped the edge of the tub. Later, after tucking her in and reading her favorite story, Jin stood to leave. He was almost at the door when he heard it. Soft, barely a whisper. Dear God, please help me be strong tomorrow at school. Please help me be brave. Jin froze, his hand on the light switch, his throat suddenly tight. His daughter was praying for courage like she was going to war, and she was 9 years old. He stood outside her door for a long time after, one hand pressed against the frame. In the darkness of the hallway, surrounded by artwork worth millions and furniture that screamed power, Jin Park felt completely helpless. His daughter was suffering and he didn't even know why. The city lights glowed through the windows. Somewhere out there, his enemies were planning, scheming, trying to find weaknesses. And they'd never guessed that his greatest weakness was sleeping in a room decorated with butterflies and fairy lights, praying for strength to face elementary school. Jin walked to his office, poured himself whiskey, and stared at the city. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he'd find out what was happening. And God help whoever was hurting his little girl. The next morning came too fast. Jin watched Zara go through her routine with even more care than usual. The braids had to be perfect. The uniform had to be spotless. She checked her backpack 3 times before they left. In the car, she was so quiet Jin could hear her breathing. Controlled, measured, like she was preparing herself. Zara, he said softly, if something's wrong at school, you'd tell me, right? She met his eyes in the mirror. For a moment he thought she might break, might tell him everything. Then she smiled that small, careful smile. Everything's fine, Appa. I promise. But Jin had spent 20 years learning when people lied to him. And his daughter, his brave little girl, was lying to protect him from something. After dropping her off, Jin didn't go to the office. He called Tae-won. Clear my schedule. Everything okay? Family matter. Jin hung up. Then he called his assistant. I need everything you can find on Gracefield Academy. Staff, complaints, incidents. Everything. How soon? Yesterday. Jin drove back to the office, but his mind was already at that school. Already planning. In his world, you didn't wait for problems to come to you. You hunted them down and eliminated them. But this wasn't his world. This was Zara's. And he was starting to realize that some wars couldn't be won with bullets and fear. His phone buzzed with the first reports by noon. Gracefield Academy. Elite private school. Wealthy families. His legitimate business front donated heavily to their programs, which is why they'd accepted Zara despite whispers about her father's real business. Jin scrolled through incident reports, parent complaints, staff records. Everything looked perfect on paper. Too perfect. He knew that pattern. It was the same way his legitimate businesses looked on paper. Clean, pristine. While underneath, reality was much different. At 2:30, Jin made a decision. He grabbed his jacket, checked his reflection in the window. No gun. No knife. No visible signs of who he really was. Just a father visiting his daughter's school. The drive to Gracefield felt longer than any meeting with rival gangs. His palms actually sweated. Jin Park, who'd faced down men with guns, was nervous about walking into an elementary school. The front office smelled like coffee and copy paper. The secretary smiled at him with professional warmth. Can I help you? I'm here to have lunch with my daughter. Jin kept his voice pleasant, friendly, the face he showed to legitimate business partners. Oh, how nice. Just sign in here. She slid a visitor badge across the counter. That easy. Jin clipped the badge to his jacket and followed the signs toward the cafeteria. The hallways were covered in student artwork and achievement posters. Everything bright and cheerful. The cafeteria doors loomed ahead. He could hear children's voices, laughter, the clatter of trays. Normal sounds. Happy sounds. Jin pushed through the doors and immediately spotted Zara in the lunch line. His heart clenched. She stood with her shoulders hunched, gripping her tray so hard her knuckles looked pale. Her whole body was tense, like she was bracing for impact. Then he heard it. "Look, it's the charity case." A boy's voice, loud enough to carry. Laughter followed. "Hey Zara, what weird food did your gangster daddy pack today?" A girl this time. More laughter. Jin's hand instinctively moved toward where his gun usually sat. But there was nothing there. He forced himself to stay still, to watch. Why doesn't she ever talk? Think she's too good for us? Another voice. Zara didn't respond, didn't react, just stood there taking it, her face carefully blank. But Jin saw the slight tremor in her chin, the way her eyes stayed fixed on her tray. A teacher stood nearby, sorting through papers. She glanced up at the comments, her lips pressing thin. Then she looked back down at her papers. Did nothing. Jin's vision went red at the edges. But he forced himself to breathe, to observe. Zara reached the front of the line, got her food, and started looking for a place to sit. Jin watched as every table she approached suddenly filled up. Kids scooting closer together, turning their backs. One girl actually put her bag in the empty seat next to her when Zara got close. His daughter stood in the middle of the cafeteria, tray in hand, surrounded by other children but completely alone. Finally, she walked to a corner table, empty except for garbage someone hadn't thrown away. She sat down with the same careful precision she showed at home. A group of girls walked past her table. "Nice hair. Looks like someone glued rope to your head." They laughed and kept walking. "My mom said people like her don't belong at schools like this," another girl said, loud enough for Zara to hear. "Said her dad probably bought her way in. With drug money probably," a boy added. More laughter. Zara's hands shook as she opened her lunch. The kimbap Jin had carefully made that morning. The tangerines he'd peeled. The special cookies they'd baked together last weekend. She took one small bite, chewing slowly, then set it down. Couldn't seem to eat more. The teacher who'd been watching earlier walked past Zara's table. Didn't stop. Didn't say anything. Just walked right past like his daughter was invisible. Jin stood against the wall, hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. Every instinct he had screamed at him to intervene, to cross that room and end this. These were children, yes, but he could make them regret every word. He could make their parents regret it. He could burn this whole fucking school down. But then Zara's eyes lifted, met his across the cafeteria. The look in her eyes stopped him cold. There was recognition, then fear. Not of him. Fear that he would do exactly what he was thinking. Fear that he would make it worse. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. "Please," that small movement said. "Please don't." And Jin understood. His daughter had been protecting him. Not herself. Him. She'd kept this secret because she knew what he was. Knew what he could do. And she was terrified he'd solve this problem the only way he knew how. With violence. So Jin stayed where he was. Watching his little girl sit alone in a corner, eating lunch by herself, enduring cruelty from children who didn't know their parents paid protection money to her father. Who didn't know the man standing in their cafeteria could end their comfortable lives with a phone call. The lunch period felt like hours. Finally, the bell rang. Kids dumped their trays and rushed out. Zara stood slowly, carefully, and threw away most of her uneaten lunch. Jin watched her disappear into the hallway with the other students. Then he stood there in the empty cafeteria, staring at the table where she'd sat, at the spot where his daughter spent every day in isolation. The cafeteria aide started cleaning up. She glanced at Jin, then away quickly. Something in her eyes said she knew exactly who he was. Jin walked out of the school in a daze, made it to his car, sat behind the wheel, and for the first time in 15 years his hands shook. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, cold rage that had nowhere to go. His phone rang. Tae-won. Boss, we got a situation with the Busan crew. Handle it, Jin said flatly. But, I said handle it. Jin hung up, started the car, drove. He didn't remember the drive home, didn't remember parking. He just found himself in his penthouse, standing by the windows, staring out at the city. His empire stretched out below him. Hundreds of businesses, thousands of people who feared him, millions in revenue, power that made politicians nervous. And none of it meant shit, because his daughter, his baby girl, was being tortured every day and he couldn't stop it. Not without destroying the one thing she'd asked of him with that look. Don't make it worse. Jin poured whiskey, drank it, poured more. His phone kept buzzing with business. Territory disputes, revenue reports. Someone needed to be dealt with. Someone needed to be paid. He ignored it all. At 3:30, his driver brought Zara home. Jin heard the door open, heard her small footsteps. He turned as she entered the living room. Hi, Appa, she said quietly. Same careful smile.
Y princess.
How was school? Fine. That word. That fucking word. Fine. When nothing was fine. When she was being destroyed piece by piece every day. Jin knelt down to her level.
Saraya.
I need you to tell me the truth. Are kids being mean to you at school? Her eyes widened. She knew he'd been there. Appa. The truth, he said gently but firmly. No more protecting me. Tell me what's happening. Tears filled her eyes. Her small shoulders started to shake. And then it all came pouring out. They say my food is weird, that I smell different, that my hair is ugly and my skin is dirty. The words tumbled out between sobs. They call me the gangster's charity case. They say you probably bought me like you buy everything else. That I don't belong there. Jin pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. One girl said her mom told her to stay away from me because my dad is dangerous. A boy said his dad said you're a criminal and I'm gonna grow up bad too. Each word was a knife in Jin's chest. And the teachers? He asked quietly. They see it, Zara whispered. Mrs. Kim watches it happen. She tells me I need to try harder to fit in. That maybe if I wasn't so sensitive, the other kids would like me better. Jin's arms tightened around his daughter. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt. How long? His voice was barely above a whisper. Since the beginning. Since I started there. She pulled back to look at him, her face wet with tears. But Appa, please don't do anything bad. Please don't hurt anyone. I don't want you to go to jail. I don't want to lose you. And there it was. The real reason for her silence. She'd been protecting him. Enduring hell every day because she was afraid of what he might do. Afraid of losing the only parent she had. Jin cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Those kids, their parents, those teachers, they're wrong. All of them. But,
No.
his voice was firm but gentle. You are my daughter. You are smart and kind and brave. Braver than anyone I know. And what's happening to you is not okay. What are you going to do? Fear crept into her voice. Jin looked at his daughter, at her tear-stained face and scared eyes, and he made a decision. I'm going to fix this, but not my way. Your way. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. No one gets hurt.
No threats.
We do this right. Okay? She searched his face. Promise. Promise. But even as he said it, even as he held his crying daughter, Jin felt that familiar coldness settling in. That calculated fury that had built his empire. Someone would pay for this. They would pay. Just not the way they expected. That night, after Zara had cried herself to exhaustion and fallen asleep, Jin sat in his office. He made calls. Not to his usual contacts. To different ones. I need information on every student, parent, and staff member at Gracefield Academy, he told his intelligence officer. Everything. Bank records, social media, complaints, lawsuits. Everything. How deep you want me to dig? To the bone. Jin hung up and opened his laptop. Started pulling files. financial records of the school, his donations, the board members. He began building a picture. His phone buzzed. Tae-won. Boss. You sure you don't want us to just... No. Jin cut him off. Not this time. They're talking, saying you've gone soft, saying the kids made you weak. Jin's jaw tightened. Let them talk. Some of the younger guys are getting ideas. Think maybe it's time for new leadership. There it was. The knife he'd been waiting for. In his world, showing weakness got you killed. And spending time worrying about school bullying instead of territory? That looked like weakness. Tell them if they want to challenge me. They know where to find me. Jin's voice was cold. But they better be ready to finish it. Because I will. Silence on the other end. Then, understood, boss. Jin hung up, stared at his reflection in the dark window. He looked tired. When had that happened? His empire was built on fear, on being the scariest thing in the room. But right now, in this expensive penthouse, surrounded by the spoils of violence, he just felt like a father who'd failed his daughter. His phone lit up with a report. The information he'd requested was starting to come in. Jin opened it and began to read. What he found made his blood run cold. This wasn't random. The bullying of Zara wasn't just kids being cruel. The incident reports going back months. Complaints from other parents about their kids being targeted. All buried. All dismissed. All following the same pattern. The principal, Kang Min-ho, had a habit. When parents with money or power complained, things got handled quickly. But parents without that leverage, their complaints disappeared into files, never acted on. There was more. Emails between certain parents. A group chat Jin's people had hacked. Messages that made him want to put his fist through the wall. The Park girl is exactly what's wrong with this school. Her father might donate money, but we all know where it comes from. My daughter shouldn't have to go to school with someone like that. She doesn't belong here. Someone needs to make that clear. They'd coordinated it. The wealthy parents of Gracefield Academy had decided his daughter didn't deserve to be there, and they were making sure she knew it. Jin read every message, every complaint that had been buried, every incident that had been dismissed. He built a timeline, pattern, a case. By dawn, he had everything he needed. He also had a plan. Not the plan his instincts screamed for. Not the solution that would involve fear and pain and broken bones. A different plan. One that terrified him more than any gang war ever had. Because it required something he'd spent 20 years eliminating from his personality. Vulnerability. Jin showered, changed into a suit, made coffee. When Zara came down for breakfast, he was waiting. We need to talk, he said gently. She sat down, fear creeping into her eyes. Did I do something wrong?
No, princess.
You did everything right. He sat beside her. But I found out some things about what's been happening at school. And I need to tell you what I'm going to do. She listened quietly as he laid out his plan. To call a meeting. To expose what was happening. To demand change. But Appa, what about your business? Won't people find out? Let them find out, Jin said firmly. My business is my business. But you're my daughter. And that's more important than anything else. Even if people think you're weak? Jin looked at his 9-year-old daughter. This brave little girl who'd been protecting him while she suffered. Being a good father doesn't make me weak, he said quietly. It makes me human. And anyone who thinks different can come talk to me about it. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Zara heard it and gave him a small smile. Okay, Appa. I trust you. Those words carried more weight than any oath of loyalty from his men. Jin pulled her into a hug, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. He'd built an empire on fear. Now he was about to gamble it all on love. And God help anyone who stood in his way. Later that morning, Jin made the call that would change everything. Principal Kang? This is Jin Park, Zara's father. His voice was pleasant, professional. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you, your staff, and the parents of students in Zara's class. This week. It's important. There was a pause. Jin could practically hear the calculations happening on the other end. Mr. Park, if this is about a specific incident, it's about many incidents, all of which have been ignored. Jin's voice stayed calm, controlled. The meeting will happen. The question is whether it happens quietly in your office or publicly in a forum. Your choice. Another pause. Longer this time. Principal Kong knew exactly who Jin Park was. Knew what refusing him could mean. I'll arrange it, Kong said finally. Thursday afternoon? Thursday works. Oh, and Principal Kong. Jin's voice dropped lower. Make sure everyone attends. Especially the parents who've been so concerned about my daughter's presence at your school. I have some things I'd like to discuss with them. After hanging up, Jin sat back in his chair. His hands were steady now. The rage had crystallized into something cold and purposeful. Taewon appeared in his doorway. You really doing this, boss? Yeah. It's risky. Exposing yourself like that. Drawing attention. I know. Taewon studied him. The men are watching. They see you focused on this school thing instead of business. Some are saying. I know what they're saying. Jin stood, walked to the window. Let them say it. Let them test me if they want. But this is happening. And if it costs you? Jin thought of Zara's tears. Her whispered prayers. Her small hand in his. Then it costs me. Taewon nodded slowly. For what it's worth, boss? That little girl's lucky to have you. After he left, Jin's phone buzzed. A message from his intelligence officer. Got something you need to see. Jin opened the file. It was surveillance footage from the school. Weeks of it. His people had been thorough. He watched Zara's daily torture play out in silent video clips. The mocking, the exclusion, the casual cruelty, and the adults who watched it happen and did nothing. Jin watched every second. Let it burn into his memory. Not for revenge. For evidence. By Thursday, the entire city seemed to know something was happening. Word had spread through the underground that Jin Park was making a move. But not a business move. Something personal. His rivals watched with interest, sensing potential weakness. His allies watched with concern. His enemies watched with hope. And Jin ignored them all. Thursday afternoon, he dressed carefully. Not in his usual intimidating black. A normal suit. Respectable. Fatherly. He picked up Zara from school early. Ready? He asked her. She nodded, though her hands shook slightly. Will you be there the whole time? Right beside you. Always. They walked into the school together. His hand on her shoulder. Protective. Proud. The meeting room was already full. Principal Kong sat at the head of the table, looking nervous. Teachers lined the walls. And the parents sat in their expensive clothes with their expensive accessories, looking at Jin with barely concealed distaste. They saw a criminal, a gangster, a man who didn't belong in their world. Jin saw people who'd tormented his daughter, and his expression was ice. Thank you all for coming, he began. His voice was calm, controlled. I know some of you would rather be anywhere else, but we need to talk about what's happening at this school. Mr. Park, one mother interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. If this is about your daughter being sensitive, it's about my daughter being bullied, systematically, while adults who should protect her chose to look away. Jin's voice never rose, never wavered, and it's about other children suffering the same way. He pulled out his tablet. Started showing evidence. The messages between parents. The buried complaints. The video footage. The room went silent. You coordinated this, Jin said simply. You decided my daughter didn't belong here. You taught your children to exclude her, to mock her, to make her feel less than human. And you did it because you think I'm beneath you. You're a criminal, one father said boldly. Everyone knows what you are. Jin smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Yes, I am. I've done things that would make you sick. I've hurt people. I've destroyed lives. He paused. But I have never, ever targeted a child. Can you say the same? The father's face went red. You think you're better than me because your money is legal? Because your cruelty is socially acceptable. Jin's voice stayed quiet, but it filled the room. You're worse. Because you hide behind respectability while teaching your children that it's okay to torture someone for being different. He turned to the principal. You had reports, complaints, evidence that children were being targeted, and you buried it. Why? Principal Kong shifted uncomfortably. These are delicate situations. We try to handle them diplomatically. You mean you handle them based on who has power? Jin cut him off. Wealthy parents complain, you act. Poor parents complain, you ignore them. Isn't that right? Silence. Jin pulled out another file. I have documentation going back 3 years. A pattern of discrimination. Children of color, children from less wealthy families, children like my daughter all reported bullying. All dismissed, while children of your wealthy donors. Their problems get solved immediately. The teachers along the wall looked uncomfortable. Some stared at the floor. So here's what's going to happen, Jin continued. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. This school is going to change. You're going to implement real anti-bullying policies. You're going to train your staff properly. You're going to treat every child with equal dignity. Or what? The same father again. You'll threaten us? Use your criminal connections. Jin smiled again. That cold smile.
No.
I'll do something much worse. I'll expose you. Every message. Every buried complaint. Every moment of cruelty you enabled. I'll give it all to the media. Social media. News outlets. Everyone will know that Gracefield Academy, with all its prestige and reputation, is built on institutional cruelty. He let that sink in. And then I'll pull my donations. All of them. Do you know how much of your budget comes from my businesses? From the businesses of people who respect me? We'll find that money goes elsewhere. And we'll encourage others to do the same. Principal Kong looked like he might be sick. You wanted to make my daughter invisible, Jin said quietly. Now I'll make your failures impossible to ignore. The room erupted. Parents shouting. The principal trying to restore order. Teachers looking shocked. Jin just stood there, calm in the center of the storm. His hand never left Zara's shoulder. Finally, one voice cut through the noise. A teacher. The same one who'd watched Zara being bullied in the cafeteria. Mrs. Kim stood up, tears streaming down her face. He's right. About all of it. Everyone stopped, stared at her. I saw what was happening to Zara, to other children, and I did nothing. Her voice broke. I told myself it wasn't my place, that I couldn't get involved, that keeping the peace was more important than protecting children. She looked at Zara, then at Jin.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I failed your daughter. I failed all of them. Another teacher stood up. Then another. Confessions spilled out. Years of watching, of staying silent, of choosing comfort over courage. Jin watched it all. Let them speak. Let the truth fill the room. When it was quiet again, he spoke. I don't want revenge. I don't want anyone hurt. I want change. Real change. My daughter deserves that. Every child here deserves that. He looked around the room. Parents who wouldn't meet his eyes. At teachers crying with shame. At a principal who looked like his world was crumbling. So here's the choice. We work together to fix this. Or I burn it all down and we start over somewhere else. Either way, this stops. Today. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Principal Kong spoke. His voice was small, defeated. What do you want us to do? Jin laid out his demands. Mandatory training, new policies, oversight committees with parent representation, monthly reviews, and consequences, real consequences for staff who enabled bullying. And one more thing, Jin added. My daughter stays. She belongs here as much as anyone else. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The threat was clear. And this time it wasn't just a criminal threatening. It was a father. One who'd shown he could destroy them without ever throwing a punch. The meeting ended in subdued agreement. Plans were made. Policies were drafted. And Jin walked out with Zara's hand in his. In the parking lot, she looked up at him. Appa, you didn't hurt anyone. I promised I wouldn't. But you still won. Jin knelt down to her level. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show people the truth. Let them see their own reflection and decide if they like what they see. Is that what you did? That's what we did. Together. She hugged him tight. I love you, Appa. I love you too, princess. Always. But as Jin drove home, his phone was already buzzing. His world wasn't done with him yet. Taewon's message was brief. We need to talk. Now. Jin dropped Zara at home with their housekeeper and drove to his office. The underground parking garage was empty except for his inner circle. 6 men. Veterans all. The ones who'd been with him from the beginning. Taewon stood at the center. His expression was grave. Boss, we got a problem. Talk. The Incheon crew. They heard about your school meeting. They're saying you've lost your edge. That you're too soft to lead. Taewon paused. They're making moves on our territory. Testing us. Jin's jaw tightened. There it was. The price of showing humanity. How many? Enough to be a problem. They've recruited some of our lower guys. Promising better leadership. Someone who's focused on business instead of... He trailed off. Instead of my daughter. Jin finished coldly. The men around him shifted uncomfortably. None of them would say it, but the question hung in the air. Had Jin gone soft? Had love made him weak? Jin looked at each of them. Men who'd killed for him, bled for him, followed him into hell multiple times. Let me be very clear, he said quietly, dangerously. My daughter is not a weakness. She's a line in the sand. Anyone who crosses it doesn't get a warning. They get buried. He stepped forward. The Incheon crew wants to test me? Fine. Let them come. But tell them this first. The man who can sit in a room full of people who hate him and win without throwing a punch is more dangerous than any hothead with a gun. The men absorbed this. Taewon nodded slowly. What do you want us to do? Send a message. The usual kind. Make it clear that compassion for my daughter doesn't mean weakness for my enemies. Jin's voice was ice. And tell them if they want my position, they're welcome to try. But they better kill me on the first shot. Because they won't get a second. As his men dispersed to handle the Incheon problem, Jin stood alone in the garage. The concrete and shadows felt more familiar than that school meeting room. This was his world. Violence, fear, power. But Zara's face kept appearing in his mind. Her smile when he'd promised to fix things without hurting anyone. Her trust. Jin had built an empire on being the monster everyone feared. Now he was trying to be the father one little girl needed. And those two things were tearing him apart. His phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Park. A woman's voice. Nervous. My name is Minji. My son attends Gracefield. He's one of the kids who was mean to your daughter. Jin's hand tightened on the phone. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I had no idea what he was doing. His father and we talked to him tonight. Really talked to him. About what he did. Why it was wrong. She paused. He wants to apologize to Zara. If that's okay. Jin was quiet for a long moment. Let me ask her. Thank you. And Mr. Park? What you did today. It was brave. Braver than anything I've seen. After she hung up, Jin sat in his car. Stared at his phone. One call. One mother actually trying to fix things. It wasn't enough. But it was something. Over the next few days, things began to shift. Slowly. Carefully. Like watching ice melt in spring. More parents called. Some to apologize. Some just to talk. The school announced new policies. Mandatory training for all staff. A committee to review complaints. Real oversight. Jin watched it all from a distance, still handling his actual business. The Incheon problem got resolved the old-fashioned way. 3 of their lieutenants disappeared. The rest got the message. Jin Park might love his daughter, but he was still the devil they knew. The balance was delicate. Father by day, monster by night. He walked both worlds with the same careful precision Zara used to arrange her breakfast. Thursday morning, Zara came down for breakfast looking different, less tense. Her shoulders weren't hunched. "Good morning, Appa," she said, and her voice was stronger. "Morning, princess. Sleep okay?" She nodded, reaching for the fruit he'd cut up. "Jiwoo's mom called last night. She wants him to apologize to me at school today. How do you feel about that?" Zara thought carefully. I think it's good." Jin set down his chopsticks. This was the question he'd been dreading. "What do you want to tell them?" "The truth. That you help run businesses. But also," she hesitated, "also that you're a good dad. That you protect people. Is that okay?" Jin felt something break and heal simultaneously in his chest. She knew what he was. He'd never hidden it completely, but she chose to see him as more than just that. "That's okay, princess. That's perfect." After dinner, after homework, after bath time, Jin tucked Zara into bed. She was already half asleep, exhausted from actually enjoying school for the first time in months. "Appa, yeah, thank you for not giving up, for not making me run away." Her eyes were already closing. "I love you. I love you too, princess. Always." He watched her drift off, her face peaceful in the nightlight's glow. No more whispered prayers for courage. No more bracing for tomorrow. Just a little girl sleeping safely. Jin stood in her doorway for a long time. Then he went to his office. His phone showed missed calls. Business waiting. His empire didn't run itself. But first, he pulled up that photo from lunch. Looked at his daughter's smile one more time. Then he got to work. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Jin balanced both his worlds with the same precision he'd used to build his empire. Father in the morning. Boss during the day. Father again at night. The school continued to change. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But genuinely. More kids started sitting with Zara. The lunch club Mrs. Kim started grew. Parents who'd been part of the problem started being part of the solution. Some didn't change. Some pulled their kids from the school entirely, rather than admit they'd been wrong. Jin let them go. Their loss. The incident reports started telling a different story. When problems arose, they were handled. No more buried complaints. No more selective enforcement. Principal Kong resigned 2 months later. The official reason was retirement. The real reason was that he couldn't face what he'd enabled for years. The new principal, Mrs. Choi, was different. Younger. She'd taught at public schools in diverse neighborhoods. She understood. Jin's business continued. His reputation in the underground remained intact. If anything, the Incheon incident reinforced it. Jin Park could be merciful when it came to his daughter's school. But cross him in business? You disappeared. The balance held. One Saturday morning, 3 months after that cafeteria visit, Jin woke to find Zara already up, sitting at the kitchen counter with paper and crayons. "What are you making?" "Invitations," she said happily. "For my birthday party. Can we have it here? I want to invite my friends from school." Jin looked at the carefully drawn cards. His daughter wanted to bring friends to their home. To his home, where everything screamed wealth and danger. "Are you sure? We could do it somewhere else." "No," Zara said firmly. "I want them here. I want them to see where I live. That it's not scary. That you're not scary. Not really." Jin thought about 8-year-olds running through his penthouse, seeing his art collection worth millions. The security, the guards. "Okay," he said. "We'll have it here." Zara's face lit up. "Really? Really? It's your day. We do it your way." She jumped up and hugged him tight. "You're the best, Appa." Planning a child's birthday party, Jin discovered, was more stressful than planning a territorial takeover. There were themes to consider. Food allergies, entertainment, parent anxieties. Mrs. Lee found his panic amusing. "Boss, you've negotiated with triads. You can handle a princess party. Triads don't care if the cake is vanilla or chocolate," Jin muttered, staring at catering options. Taewon walked in during one of these planning sessions. Took in the streamers and balloon samples spread across Jin's usual strategy table. Said nothing, but Jin saw him fighting a smile. Not one word, Jean warned. Wasn't going to say anything, boss. Just thinking how far we've come. Yeah. Jean looked at the party plans. His daughter's wishes written in her careful handwriting. We have. The party was controlled chaos. 12 nine-year-olds in his penthouse. Their parents lingering nervously, clearly unsure about being in Jin Park's home. But Zara was radiant. She introduced her friends to Mrs. Lee, who'd made traditional Korean treats, showed them her room, played games with them, was just a normal kid having a normal birthday. Jean watched from the side, ever the observer. Some parents stayed distant. Some tried to make conversation. A few, like Jiwoo's mother, seemed genuinely happy to be there. Mr. Park, Sarah's father approached nervously. I wanted to thank you for what you did at the school. My daughter told me about Zara, about what she went through. I'm ashamed to say I didn't know. Most people didn't want to know, Jean replied. Not unkindly, just factual. That's changing. Thanks to you. Jean shook his head. Thanks to Zara. She's the brave one. He watched his daughter laugh with her friends, blow out candles on her cake, open presents with genuine excitement. This, he thought, this is what winning looks like. That night, after all the guests left and the apartment was quiet again, Zara sat with Jean on the couch. She was exhausted but happy. Best birthday ever, she declared. Yeah. Thank you, Appa, for everything. Jean pulled her close. You don't have to thank me for loving you. That's just what fathers do. Not all fathers, she said quietly. I know that. That's why you're special. He kissed the top of her head, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Later, he stood at his window overlooking the city. His empire, his kingdom, built on fear and blood and power. But the real treasure was sleeping in her room, surrounded by birthday cards from friends she'd made. A little girl who'd taught a monster how to be human. Jin's phone buzzed. Business never stopped. Territory issues, money problems, the usual. He handled it efficiently, made decisions, gave orders, was the man his organization needed him to be. But part of him was already thinking about tomorrow, about making Zara pancakes for breakfast, about the parent-teacher conference scheduled next week, about the normal, domestic things that had become more important than any business deal. The city lights glowed below him. Seoul never slept. Neither did its darkness. But up here in this expensive penthouse there was light. There was laughter. There was love. And Jin Park, the most dangerous man in Seoul, had learned that protecting that light was worth more than controlling the darkness. 6 months after the cafeteria incident, Jean attended his first parent volunteer day. Him, in a classroom, helping kids with art projects. The other parents gave him space at first. Old habits. But Zara pulled him right into the middle of it all. Appa, can you help Min-jun with cutting? He's having trouble. Jean found himself sitting at a table with 8-year-olds, showing them how to cut construction paper. His hands, which had broken bones and pulled triggers, carefully guiding small fingers in using safety scissors. Mr. Park. Min-jun looked up at him with wide eyes. Zara says you're really strong. Is that true? Jean glanced at his daughter, who smiled innocently. I work out, he said diplomatically. Can you open this? Min-jun held up a juice box, struggling with the straw. Jean opened it, handed it back. The kid beamed like he'd witnessed a miracle. Thanks, Mr. Park. You're the best. Taewon would never let him hear the end of this if word got out. The boss opening juice boxes. By the end of the day, Jean had glitter in his hair and paint on his expensive shirt. The other parents had warmed up, started talking to him like a person, not a rumor. Mrs. Choi, the new principal, stopped by. Mr. Park, thank you for volunteering. Having parent involvement makes such a difference. Happy to help. She lowered her voice. You know, when I took this job, I heard stories. About you. About what happened here. She paused. What you did, standing up for your daughter like that, it changed more than just this school. Other schools are looking at their policies now, asking hard questions. You started something important. Jean didn't know what to say to that. He'd just been trying to protect his kid. She's lucky to have you, Mrs. Choi added. And we're lucky to have her. Driving home, Zara chattered about the art projects and how all her friends thought Jin was cool. Even after I told them you can't cook very well, she added with a mischievous smile. Hey, I've gotten better. The kimchi jjigae last week was still too salty. Jin laughed. Actually laughed. When was the last time he'd done that? At a stoplight, he looked over at his daughter. She was humming to herself, swinging her legs, completely at ease.
Zara ya.
Yeah. Are you happy? She stopped humming, looked at him seriously. Yeah, Appa. I really am. Good. That's all I want. What about you? Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Happy. What a strange concept. He'd spent 20 years chasing power, respect, fear, never happiness. Yeah, he said, surprised to find it true. I think I am. That night, Jin got a call from an unexpected source. His old mentor, the man who'd brought him into this life 20 years ago. Heard you've been busy, Mr. Huang said. His voice was old, gravelly. With school meetings, birthday parties. Word travels fast. It always does. Some people are saying you've lost your edge. Gone soft. Pause. Want to know what I think? What? I think they're idiots. The Jin Park who can sit in a room full of people who hate him and win without bloodshed. That's more terrifying than the kid who used to solve everything with his fists. Mr. Huang chuckled. You've evolved. That's not weakness. That's growth. Tell that to the young guys challenging my authority. The ones still alive? Mr. Huang's tone turned cold. I heard about Incheon. You made your point. Anyone with sense got the message. Love your daughter all you want. You're still the devil when you need to be. After hanging up, Jin thought about those words. The devil when he needed to be. Was that his identity now? Split between two worlds. Or maybe he thought watching Zara sleep peacefully in her room. Maybe he was just a man trying to do better. To be better. For her. The next parent-teacher conference came 2 weeks later. Jin sat in those small chairs again, Zara beside him, listening to Mrs. Choi talk about academic progress. Zara's thriving, Mrs. Choi said warmly. Her grades are excellent. But more importantly, she's engaged, participates in class, has good friends. She's really found her place here. That's good to hear, Jin said, and meant it. I wanted to mention, Mrs. Choi continued, we've started a mentorship program, pairing older students with younger ones who might be struggling. Socially, Zara volunteered to be a mentor. Jin looked at his daughter. You did. Zara nodded. There's a new girl, Sumin. She just moved here from Busan. The kids are being mean to her because she talks different. I remember what that feels like. I want to help. Pride swelled in Jin's chest. His daughter, who'd been tortured, wanted to protect someone else from the same fate. That's very kind of you, Mrs. Choi said. We think Zara would be perfect for it. Walking out of that conference, Jin thought about cycles. How pain either breaks you or shapes you. Zara had chosen to let it shape her into someone who protected others. She'd learned that from him, he realized. Not the violence, not the fear, the protection, the standing up. Maybe he'd taught her something good after all. That weekend, Jin took Zara to a park. Not a fancy one, just a normal neighborhood park with swings and slides. They sat on a bench eating ice cream, watching other kids play. Appa, can I ask you something? Zara licked her chocolate cone carefully. Always. Why did you adopt me? Really? Jin was quiet for a moment. He'd never told her the full truth. That he'd found her in a warehouse. That he'd killed the men who'd hurt her. That seeing her small, scared face had cracked something in him he thought was dead. Because, he said finally, when I looked at you, I saw someone who deserved better. Someone who needed protecting. And I realized I could be that person. That I wanted to be that person. Even though you're scary to other people? Especially because of that. Being scary means I can keep you safe. Zara leaned against his side. You're not scary to me. You're just Appa. Jin wrapped his arm around her. Good. That's how it should be. They sat there while the sun went down, painting the sky orange and pink. Normal father, normal daughter, normal moment. Jin's phone buzzed. Business. Always business. But he ignored it. This moment mattered more. Later that night, after Zara was asleep, Jin finally checked his messages. Territory dispute. Someone was pushing boundaries, testing him. He made calls, gave orders, reminded people why he was still in charge. The coldness came back easily, the calculated violence, the fear. But now he could set it down when he got home, could wash it off before tucking his daughter into bed. The monster could be put away. Most nights. One Thursday evening, Jin came home late. There'd been a problem. The kind that required his personal attention. The kind that left blood on his clothes. He showered quickly, changed, tried to erase the evidence. But when he went to say goodnight to Zara, she was still awake, reading in bed. "You're home late," she said. "Business ran long."
Sorry.
She studied him carefully. "Appa, are you okay?"
I'm fine, princess.
"You have a cut on your hand." Jin looked down. He'd missed it. A small cut across his knuckles. "It's nothing." Zara set down her book. "I know what you do, Appa. I'm not dumb." Jin's chest tightened. "Zara, it's okay," she said quietly. "I know you do bad things sometimes. To protect us. To keep us safe." She paused. "I don't like it, but I understand it." Jin sat on the edge of her bed. "I'm trying to do better. To be better." "I know. I can tell." She reached out and carefully touched the cut on his hand. "Just be careful, okay? I need you. I will. I promise." She hugged him tight, and Jin held his daughter, this brave little girl who loved him despite knowing what he was, who saw the monster and chose to see the father too. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too, even the scary parts." Jin left her room with tears in his eyes. His daughter knew, maybe not everything, but enough, and she loved him anyway. That was grace he didn't deserve, but he'd spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of it. The following Saturday, Jin attended another volunteer event at the school, a fundraiser for new playground equipment. Parents manning booths, kids running around. Normal, domestic. Jiwoo's father approached him, the man who'd called him a criminal at that first meeting. "Mr. Park," he said stiffly. "Mr. Kong." Awkward silence. Then, "I owe you an apology. For what I said. For what my son did. For..." He trailed off. "For all of it." Jin studied him. Saw genuine remorse. "Your son apologized. Meant it. That's enough." "Is it? Because I don't think." "It's enough," Jin repeated firmly. "We move forward. That's all we can do." Mr. Kong nodded slowly. Then, "My wife wanted me to ask. We're having a barbecue next month. Would you and Zara like to come? As a family. Not anything else." Jin was quiet. An invitation to normal social interaction with people who'd hated him. "Let me check with Zara," he said finally. "If she wants to go, we'll be there." Later, he asked Zara about the barbecue. "Do you want to go?" She asked back. "I asked you first." She thought about it. I think we should go. Jiwoo's been really nice lately, and his little sister is funny. It might be fun." So they went. The following month, Jin Park, head of Seoul's most powerful criminal organization, attended a suburban barbecue, ate hot dogs, made small talk about weather and schools, helped kids with a sprinkler. It was surreal, but also kind of nice. Taewon texted him halfway through. "Boss? Where are you? We got a situation." "Handle it," Jin typed back. "I'm at a barbecue." "A what?" "You heard me." He could almost hear Taewon's confusion through the phone. Driving home that evening, Zara dozed in the back seat, exhausted from playing. Jin looked at her in the mirror. Sun-tired, happy, normal. This was what he'd fought for. These quiet moments. This peace. His phone rang. "Mr. Huang again. Heard you're going to barbecues now." the old man said. Was that amusement in his voice? News travels fast. Always does. You know what I realized, Jean? You're building something different. Not just an empire. A life. Maybe that's smarter than what any of us did. Maybe. The young guys still grumbling? Some. But they're learning. I'm not weak. I'm just balanced. Balance is good. Keeps you sharp. Pause. Your girl's lucky. You know that. I'm the lucky one. After hanging up, Jean thought about luck. About finding Zara in that warehouse. About choosing to be more than just a monster. About stumbling into fatherhood and discovering it was the hardest, most important thing he'd ever done. Time passed. Seasons changed. Zara grew. The school year ended with her having actual friends. Good grades, confidence. Summer came. Jean took time off, actual time off, to be with her. They traveled. Visited temples. Went to the beach. Played tourist in their own country. At one point, sitting on a beach watching the sunset, Zara said, "Appa, I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my daughter. Even though I messed up your life?" Jean looked at her sharply. "You didn't mess up anything. You made it better. But you had to change everything. Fight people. Go to meetings. Best thing I ever did." He pulled her close. "You taught me that being strong isn't just about being feared. It's about protecting the people you love. Standing up for what's right. That's real strength." "You taught me that too," Zara said quietly. "That I don't have to be small and quiet. That I can take up space. That I matter." They sat together as the sun went down. Father and daughter, both changed by each other in ways they were still discovering. When school started again in the fall, Zara walked through those gates with her head high. No more fear. No more dread. Just a kid going to school. Jean watched from the car and felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Breathe. Love. Hope. His phone buzzed. Business. Territory issues. Money problems. The usual. But also a text from Mrs. Choi. A photo of Zara at her mentor meeting, helping the new girl Sumin with homework. Both girls smiling. Jean saved that photo. Sent it to Mrs. Lee. To Taewon. To Mr. Huang. His daughter was thriving. And somehow, despite everything, despite his violence, his darkness, his past, he'd helped make that possible. That evening, Jean attended a PTA meeting. Volunteered to help with the winter festival. Sat next to parents who used to fear him, who now just saw him as another dad trying to do right by his kid. It was weird, uncomfortable sometimes, but also good. After the meeting, Mrs. Choi pulled him aside. "Mr. Park, I wanted to let you know. The district is implementing the policies we developed here at other schools. Your actions here started a ripple effect. That's good. More than good. It's important." She smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to fight for your daughter. For all our children." Driving home, Jean thought about bravery. He'd always associated it with violence, with facing down enemies, with not showing fear. But real bravery, he'd learned, was sitting in uncomfortable meetings, admitting when you were wrong, changing, growing, showing up for your kid even when it was awkward or hard or exposed your vulnerability. Real bravery was being a father. At home, Zara was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up when he walked in. "How was the meeting?" "Good. I'm helping with the winter festival." "Really?" Her face lit up. "That's so cool, Appa." Jean sat down beside her. "Yeah, guess I'm a full-fledged PTA dad now." She laughed. "Wait until I tell my friends." "Please don't." But she was already texting, giggling to herself. Jean watched her, this confident, happy kid. So different from the quiet, scared girl she'd been a year ago. They'd both changed. Both grown. Both learned. And somehow, against all odds, they'd built something good. Something real. Something worth protecting. Later, standing at his window overlooking the city, Jean thought about the two worlds he lived in. The darkness below. The light in his home. He'd spent his whole life in the darkness. Building empires on fear. Creating power through violence. Becoming a monster. But Zara had shown him another way. that the strongest thing wasn't being feared. It was being loved, being trusted, being there. His phone rang. Tae-won. Boss, we got confirmation. The Incheon remnants are trying to reorganize. Want us to crush them, Jin said flatly. Completely. Make an example. Done. Jin hung up. The monster was still there. Still necessary sometimes. But it didn't define him anymore. He walked to Zara's room. She was already asleep, homework finished and neatly put away. Her face was peaceful, safe. Jin stood in her doorway, like he'd done so many nights before. But this time, he wasn't worried about her prayers for courage. Wasn't afraid she was hiding pain. This time, he just watched his daughter sleep. Content. Happy. Whole. Thank you, he whispered. Not sure if he was talking to God or to Zara herself. Maybe both. Thank you for saving me, because that's what she'd done. This little girl had saved the monster, had shown him that redemption was possible, that love was stronger than fear, that being a father was the most important job he'd ever have. Jin closed her door softly. Tomorrow there would be breakfast to make, school to drive to, business to handle, enemies to face, the usual balance of light and darkness. But tonight, there was just peace. Hard-won, precious, real. And in that peace, Jin Park, the most dangerous man in Seoul, finally understood what it meant to be truly powerful. It meant being strong enough to be gentle, brave enough to be vulnerable, fierce enough to protect love instead of fear. It meant being a father, and that was enough. 2 years later, the morning sun painted Zara's room in gold. She was 11 now, taller, more confident. Still his little girl, but growing into her own person. Appa, she called from the kitchen. I made coffee. Jin walked in to find breakfast laid out. Not perfect. The eggs were a little overdone. But she'd tried. That's what mattered. Since when do you make breakfast? He asked, sitting down. Since you taught me. I wanted to surprise you. She beamed. Also, I need to ask you something. What? Sumin, the girl I've been mentoring? Her family's having trouble. Her dad lost his job and they might have to move. Zara looked at him seriously. Can you help? Jin studied his daughter. She knew what he could do, the power he had, and she was asking him to use it. Not for violence, for help. What kind of help does he need? Just a job, a chance. He's a good person, Appa. He just needs someone to give him an opportunity. Jin nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. Find something. Zara hugged him tight. Thank you. You're the best. Later, Jin did make calls. Found Sumin's father a position at one of his legitimate businesses. Good pay. Benefits. A real opportunity. When Zara found out, she cried. Happy tears. See, Appa? This is what real power is. Helping people. And Jin realized she was right. He'd spent decades building power through fear. But this, using his influence to help instead of hurt, this felt better. Stronger. More meaningful. That evening, the family they'd helped came to thank Jin personally. Sumin's father bowed deeply. Mr. Park, I don't know how to thank you. Take care of your family, Jin said simply. That's thanks enough. After they left, Zara looked at him with shining eyes. You're a good person, Appa. I know you don't think so sometimes, but you are. Jin pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. I'm trying to be, because of you. No, you already were. You just needed someone to remind you. That night, Jin got a call from Mrs. Choi. Mr. Park, I have news. The district wants to recognize your contributions to school reform. There's going to be a ceremony. That's not necessary. It's already planned. And honestly, you deserve it. What you started here changed the entire district. Other schools have adopted our policies. Children are safer. That matters. Jin thought about refusing, about staying in the shadows where he belonged. But then he thought about Zara. How proud she'd be. How this would show her that doing the right thing gets recognized. Okay, he said. I'll be there. The ceremony was held on a Saturday morning in the school auditorium. Jin wore a suit, A nice one, but not intimidating. Zara sat in the front row, beaming. Mrs. Choi spoke first. 2 years ago, a father walked into the school and demanded we do better. Not with threats, not with violence, but with truth. He showed us our failures and challenged us to be better. Today, because of his courage, this district is a safer place for all children. She called Jin to the stage. He walked up, uncomfortable with the attention. The applause was genuine. Parents he'd confronted, teachers who'd confessed, all clapping. "I don't deserve this," Jin said into the microphone. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who loves his daughter." He looked at Zara. "She's the brave one. She endured. She forgave. She taught me that real strength isn't about being feared. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." His voice grew stronger. "Every child deserves to feel safe at school, to be themselves without fear, to be celebrated, not tolerated. That's not special treatment. That's basic human dignity." He paused. "Thank you for listening, for changing, for being willing to admit mistakes and do better. That's true courage." More applause. Jin stepped down, uncomfortable but proud. Zara ran up and hugged him. "Best speech ever, Appa." "You think?" "I know." After the ceremony, families mingled. Jin found himself surrounded by people thanking him, sharing their own stories, how the changes had helped their kids too. Jiwoo's father approached. "Mr. Park, I wanted you to know. My son talks about Zara all the time, about how brave she is, how kind. You raised an amazing daughter. She raised herself. I just tried not to screw it up too badly." They both laughed. Driving home, Zara was quiet, thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" Jin asked. "I was thinking about that day, when you came to the cafeteria. How scared I was that you'd do something violent. But you didn't." She looked at him. "You chose a harder path, and it changed everything. You asked me to, so I did. But you could have ignored me, done it your way. But you listened. You trusted me." She smiled. "That meant everything, Appa." Jin felt his throat tighten. "You're going to make me cry in traffic." "Good. You're always making me cry with your emotional moments." He laughed, wiping his eyes. "When did you get so sassy?" "I learned from the best." At home, Jin's phone showed missed calls from Taewon. Business. Always business. He called back. "Boss, sorry to interrupt, but we got a situation." "Talk." "New crew trying to move into Gangnam. Young guys, don't know the rules. They heard about you going soft. Think they can push." Jin's jaw tightened. "Set up a meeting. Tonight." "You sure?" "It's Saturday." "I'm sure. Some lessons need to be taught in person." After hanging up, Jin found Zara in her room. "Princess, I have to go out tonight." "Business? The dangerous kind?" He hesitated. She knew. No point lying. "Maybe, but I'll be careful." She hugged him. "Come back safe. Okay? I need you. Always." The meeting was in a warehouse. Jin's territory. His rules. The young crew leader was cocky, full of himself. Thought Jin's recent focus on family made him weak. Jin let him talk. Let him posture. Let him think he had a chance. Then, in one smooth motion, Jin had the kid on his knees, gun to his head. The warehouse went silent. "You think loving my daughter makes me soft?" Jin's voice was ice. "It makes me more dangerous, because now I have something to lose, something worth protecting, and I will end anyone who threatens that. Anyone." He pressed the gun harder. "You want this territory? You want my position? Then kill me right now, because if you don't, you'll never get another chance. And I promise you won't like what comes next." The kid was shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "You meant it. You just thought I was too soft to respond." Jin leaned closer. "Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never mistake love for softness. I can be both a father and a monster. And you just met the monster." He released the kid. "Let him scramble away. Get out of my territory. Take your crew and leave Seoul. If I see you again, I won't be this merciful." They ran. Taewon approached, eyebrows raised. Didn't even have to shoot him. Didn't need to. He got the message. Jin holstered his weapon. Make sure word spreads. I'm still the devil when I need to be. Yes, boss. Driving home, Jin felt the familiar coldness fading, the monster going back into its cage. By the time he pulled into his building's garage, he was just a father again. Zara was still awake, reading in the living room. She looked up when he entered. You okay?
I'm fine.
Did you hurt anyone?
No.
Just scared them. She nodded, came over and hugged him. Good. I don't like when you have to do that, but I understand why sometimes you do. Jin held his daughter, this incredible person who understood his duality, who loved all of him, even the dark parts. I'm trying to be better, he whispered. I know, and you are. The next morning was Sunday, their day. Jin made breakfast, getting better at it. Zara helped. They ate together, talking about her upcoming school project, her friends, normal things. Appa, I was thinking, Zara said carefully, about what you do. Your business. Jin's stomach tightened. Yeah, I know it's dangerous. I know it's not always legal. She looked at him seriously. But I also see how you help people. Like Sumin's family. How you protect people. How you're changing things at the school, in the district. Where are you going with this? I just want you to know that I understand. You're not just one thing. You're complicated. And that's okay. She smiled. You're my complicated. Sometimes scary. Always protective. Trying his best Appa. And I love you exactly as you are. Jin couldn't speak. Just pulled her into a hug and held on. I love you too, princess. So much. They spent the day together. Park. Ice cream. Movie at home. Simple. Perfect. That evening, after Zara went to bed, Jin stood at his usual spot by the window. The city spread below him, his empire, his kingdom. But his real treasure was sleeping down the hall. The little girl who'd saved a monster, who'd taught him that redemption was possible, that love was stronger than fear. His phone showed messages from his organization. Territory secured. Rivals retreating. Business as usual. But also a message from Mrs. Choi. A photo from the ceremony. Jin and Zara hugging on stage. He saved that photo. Sent it to everyone who mattered. His daughter's smile. His own awkward pride. Evidence that he was more than just a criminal. That he was a father. Jin walked to Zara's room one last time. She slept peacefully, surrounded by her things. Awards from school. Photos of friends. Evidence of a life well lived. Thank you, he whispered again. For everything. He closed her door softly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New threats. New balancing acts between his two worlds. But tonight there was peace. Hard won. Precious. Real. And in that peace, Jin Park finally understood what true power meant. It meant being strong enough to change. Brave enough to love. Fierce enough to protect what mattered without destroying it in the process. It meant being human. And for the first time in his violent, bloody life, that was enough. 5 years later, epilogue. Zara stood at her middle school graduation valedictorian, giving a speech about courage and standing up for others. Jin sat in the audience, surrounded by other parents, tears streaming down his face. His daughter, his amazing, brilliant, brave daughter. After the ceremony, she ran to him, 14 years old now, growing into a remarkable young woman. You came. Of course I came. Wouldn't miss it. Even though you had that meeting? Rescheduled it. You're more important. She hugged him tight. Love you, Appa. Love you too, princess. Always. That evening, at their celebration dinner, Zara announced her plans. I want to be a lawyer, to help people who don't have anyone to fight for them. Jin smiled. Of course she did. You'll be amazing at it. You think so? I know so. You've been fighting for justice since you were 9 years old. Later, Jin received word that the Incheon problem had been resolved. Permanently, his empire stood strong, his position secure. But as he looked at Zara, laughing with Mrs. Lee about something, He realized his real legacy wasn't his criminal empire. It was this, the daughter he'd raised, the person she'd become, the changes they'd started together. That night, standing at his window one last time, Jin thought about the journey. From monster to father, from feared to loved, from darkness to light. It hadn't been easy. He still did dark things, still made hard choices, still lived in violence when necessary. But he also went to parent-teacher conferences, helped with homework, attended ceremonies, made breakfast, tucked his daughter in at night. He was both, monster and father, darkness and light, fear and love. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. His phone buzzed. Zara, from her room. Appa, can we watch a movie? Jin smiled, typed back, on my way, because that's what mattered. Not his empire, not his reputation, not his power, just being there, for her, always. Jin Park had built his kingdom on fear, but he'd found his purpose in love, and that was the greatest power of all. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fight or run or threaten. Sometimes it's sitting in an uncomfortable room full of people who hate you and demanding they do better. Sometimes it's choosing your child over your reputation. Sometimes it's being vulnerable when every instinct says to be strong. Because real strength isn't about being feared. It's about being there, being present, being willing to change and grow and admit when you're wrong. Jin Park learned that from a 9-year-old girl who'd been brave enough to endure, to forgive, to love a monster and see the father underneath. So let me ask you, if you were in that cafeteria, seeing your child suffer, would you have handled it with violence or with truth? Would you have chosen the easy path or the right one? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if the story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe because more powerful stories like this are coming your way. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's fighting their own battles, someone who needs to know that change is possible. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And welcome to a new year of unforgettable stories. Stories about courage, about redemption, about love winning over fear. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the city becomes the best father in the world. And that's a story worth telling. See you in the next one.